Mark and I have got to go off to a PCS fringe meeting, and there's a group of people outside as well, so I'll speak here and then I'll go and speak outside as we did last time round. It's great to have such a fantastic attendance, really. Can I just say this on a personal note? Some of you know 3 years ago I had a heart attack, a minor heart attack, etc., and went to the NHS, got a stent put in, and to the concern of the right, it made me more active than before. But Mark Sawatka had to go one better. I just want to say this, it is just fantastic to have Mark back in full activity. I'll be brief because there's lots of speakers. When we set up the LRC all those years ago, the objective was to ensure that we had an organisation that would bring the left of the Labour Party together to develop the policies, to recruit the members, to secure them into positions, elected positions, so that when we went into government, we had a socialist government. That was the objective. Now, in 2003, that was a hell of an ambition. And I'm an eternal optimist, but not even I thought we'd be here like this today, all those years ago. And if someone had told me that I was going to be the Shadow Chancellor, I would have said, why didn't you support me for the leadership when I stood? That same endeavour is what we have to undertake at the moment. Okay. Now, on these fringe meetings, I'm trying to be extremely careful on what I say because there's always a Daily Mail reporter, and if the person sitting next to you looks like a Daily Mail reporter, could you just say to them, we'll offer them a course in journalism at some time? We have the same objectives now as we had then, which is about the development of the policies and the ideas, recruiting Labour Party members, training them into a campaigning organisation, and then training them to take office and election. And that remains the same objective. But I tell you, if you go into that conference hall now, 2,700 delegates, and you talk and you listen, the ideas that are flowing are forming the foundation of a movement for socialism in this country that maybe we haven't had for a generation at least. And it is exhilarating, absolutely exhilarating. And so we need to now think how we ensure that all those people are now with us in their mass numbers can be used to ensure that we then translate that into elected office at every level. And I just say this one thing about the left. We've always had a reticence about people coming forward because we all think, well, you know, I'm not ambitious, or I'm not personally ambitious, or I'm really not up to the job, there's always someone better, or I don't want to be seen to be pushing myself forward, etc. I think we've got to dismiss that attitude now. I think all of you now have got to recognise you have a responsibility on your shoulders, yes, to get us into government, but you've got a responsibility on your shoulders as well to serve in elected office wherever you can. And that means within the party, within the constituencies and the regions, but also in the local councils. And yes, we've got to break this sort of lack of confidence in ourselves to think that every working class person in this country could stand to be an MP and would be just as good as any of them that are in there at the moment. So the issue for us now as an organisation, as the LRC, is we've got to now be serious about making sure we get our members into elected office. Now, again, Jeremy is launching a review of the party structures. Katie Clark will be leading on that, reporting to Ian Lavery. In that review, we've got to make sure that whatever comes out of that review enables us as a party to put the resources in, yes, to recruit and train people, but also to ensure that there is a fair selection process as well. What we've seen in the recent period, unfortunately, in a number of areas, is the inability of the left, in some instances, to fight through the bureaucracy to get onto selection panels, to get shortlisted and then to get elected. So there's some serious work that we have to do now in terms of making sure when that review comes out, we establish a truly democratic party. And I say this in all seriousness because I think this next 12 months is make or break about whether or not the momentum we've built up now will be maintained, and that in addition to having Jeremy as leader and some elements of the shadow cabinet being solidly on, the shadow cabinet now being solidly on the left, etc., but we've got to populate every aspect of the constituency parties and elected office now with socialists. We've got to populate it at every level. So there's a lot of work that has to be done. So the LRC's original mission, I think, maintains the same. The second issue is that when we founded the LRC, it was about the debate about policy and the development of policy. The last manifesto was, if you like, almost written for us by the LRC debates that have been happening over recent years in particular. So we've established and won the argument around most of those policies. But to be frank, we need to now make sure that we radicalise that manifesto even further, because there's a whole range of issues that we have to address that in the short time that we had to write that manifesto, we haven't been able to address in particular. So again, in terms of the role of the LRC, I think we have a specific role about bringing people together to talk about how now we go forward about radicalising it. And it needs to be done at the very local level as well. So as the LRC, with our membership that we've got, we should be taking that manifesto in every constituency now, talking about how we roll the manifesto promises out in that particular area. Because the next time we fight an election, it's got to be based upon a huge grassroots campaign of convincing people and engaging people in the implementation of that manifesto. That's what socialism is all about. We can't be a party anymore that writes a manifesto, hands it down from on high, and says as a national government that's what we're going to implement. That will not work anymore. What we've got to do is be the grassroots movement that engages with people, takes those manifesto commitments and talks about in our own towns, in our own communities, in our own streets, what that means. And then also say, where are the gaps? How do we fulfill those gaps? And make sure that when we go into the next election, we're absolutely clear that we hit the deck running in terms of the implementation of those policies, not just at the national level, but at the local level as well. The third thing I just want to say as well, I'm putting work on us all really, but this is what has to be done. As well as recruiting, training, populating the Labour Party, developing the policies themselves, obviously, to win hearts and minds, we have to ensure that we're campaigning at the same time. Now, this next few months, and Mark and others will be talking about it, I'm sure, this next few months is going to be absolutely critical in terms of the campaigns with trade unions to tackle the issue of the pay gap and securing a decent pay for everybody in this country. Now, again, what that means is raising levels of awareness about the scale of poverty and hardship and debt and all the other factors associated with an austerity regime that's existed for 7 years and has hit people so hard. And that builds up then to an understanding of why people then are being forced to take industrial action. And when that industrial action comes, our role is to be on every picket line that occurs, every demonstration that happens. I don't say that as an act of provocation. I say that that's our role. That's our role. The issue for us is, it's like when the FBU had their struggle years ago. The LRC performed an important task in linking up with the FBU when they were under attack and defending them, etc. And that was, I think, welcomed by those trade unions themselves. When the bakers launched their McDonald's campaign, it was LRC members that were involved in the demonstrations outside the shops and all the rest of it, and it gave encouragement and actually built the courage of others then to join the union and continue on. Mark is now balloting his members about, again, concerns what's happening in the DWP, etc. And when that ballot comes out, I'm convinced there'll be overwhelming opposition to what the government is doing and overwhelming support for workers themselves to take action. And again, what we need to be is alongside those workers. But one of the things we've always argued for in the LRC, of course we support the individual disputes, of course we do. But when we campaign together, we're effective together. When we strike together, we win together. So that's why, from the LRC's point of view, we've supported consistently that if there is to be industrial action around the pay cap, we support coordinated action. Coordinated action. And again, I say that not as an act of provocation, but as I think we're at a serious moment in our movement at the moment. Because I think what the Tories will do in the budget will bring forward some elements of increases in pay. They'll do a divide and rule strategy. They'll identify some workers who'll get some increases at certain levels, nothing that I think that's significant, and they'll leave others alone. And what they'll do is divide and rule, then try and pick off individual unions. So our job as the LRC is to support in solidarity the action that will take. Okay. That's quite sombre work, and it's quite hard work in this coming period, but it's the work that we knew would eventually come, because this gives us the opportunity over the next couple of months, really, to break the back of austerity, to get people to ensure that we have a real living wage in this country, to ensure that people who go to work are protected from the inflation cuts that are coming, and at the same time to build the movement as a campaigning movement. That's where we're at. And again, I just say this, 14, 15 years ago, we knew these struggles were coming, but we were unsure whether or not the Labour Party would be able to be capable of leading those struggles. The victory that we've had in these last 2 years, that came almost unexpectedly to many of us, is that we now have a Labour leadership that will lead those struggles rather than stand on one side and allow them to happen. Finally, and I'll go outside, or Claire will just kick me out anyway. Finally, we've done in detail now the sort of analysis of the British election survey. You know, it's the most detailed survey of where our votes came from at the last election. And it's interesting. 83% of the people who voted Labour in 2015 voted Labour in 2017. We took about 18 to 20% of UKIP votes. About 50% went to the Tories. Only 80% of Tories stuck with their party. So even then we're in front. We took Liberal votes, we demolished the Lib Dems. We actually took the Green votes as well, in a huge map, a huge size of them. That's where our vote came from. The Labour voters mostly stuck with us. We took from UKIP, we took from Lib Dems, we took from Greens. If you look at the age profile... SNP too, John. SNP too. How could I forget them? And a bit of Plaid. But if you look at the age profile was anyone under the age of 45, 50, we had enormous leads. Okay. So we've got to look at where those votes come from next time to take us into power. We've got to hold on to the votes we've got. That means mobilising young people. I tell now that some of the mobilisation between 14 and 18-year-olds is absolutely critical to us now, the new generation coming on. But in addition to that, we've got to look at other areas. Of course, we've got to look to see if we can get some of the older votes back to us as well. And a lot of the work that we're doing on policy development and grassroots campaigning is targeted at them. But there's a huge group of people who just don't register, or if they register, they don't vote. And they're largely what Guy Standing calls the precariat, the people who have no stake in society whatsoever, who are completely alienated. From the LRC's point of view, that's our target. That's our target. Now, what we should be doing, and we're going to convene a conference in the new year from the party around the precariat, linking up with the various unions that we can and community organisations to actually target those people, to understand the lives that they're living and what prevents them from participating in civil society, and to offer them what we've offered the country now, hope, to offer them hope. And in that way, this is, when we sat down at this general election, the professionals told us, look, young people are called non-voters because they don't vote. Well, we said, we'll break that, we'll make sure that doesn't happen ever again, and we mobilise them. It's the same with the precariat. They're told non-voters because they don't vote. This time round, we're going to shock them again. And those people, who some of them are the most vulnerable in our society, completely alienated, if we give them hope and tell them there's a Labour Party that will tackle the problems that they're facing on a daily basis, that all they have to do is help us with a ballot, with a vote, and we go into government, I think we'll sweep into power. Because I don't want to go into power with a majority of 1 or 2 or 3. We need a large, workable majority. That's our ambition. That's the role of the LRC. Solidarity.